Hey, what is up everyone? Today I'm taking a look at the High Grade Gundam Mk-III. When it comes to premium Bandai or rare kits, this video would not have been possible without those absolutely fantastic people over at Bai. So if you're looking for a kit, I guarantee you will find it on Bai. The link is down there in the description. So jumping right on into the overview of absolutely everything that comes in the box, and as well as the High Grade Gundam Mk-III itself, we've got the shield, 2 different types of beam rifle, 2 different types of beam saber, a pair of alternate hands, as well as the standard holding hands that was attached onto the Mk-III since the beginning of the review. But anyway, let's check out the Mk-III first. So first off, talking a little bit about the build of this kit, and the High Grade Gundam Mk-III is a fairly average, modern high grade build, which is a very good thing. The color accuracy could be a little bit better. The blue plastic this is made out of does mark a little bit when you're chopping it off the runner, but besides that, it's about par for a high grade kit. Just in case you don't know, this is heavily based on the High Grade Tertium Gundam from the High Grade Gundam Build Divers line. Which is kind of funny because when it came to the build franchises, it was usually the other way around. The kits were based on kits that had come out before. Whereas sometimes it's going the other way around here. We get a kit in a series which is based in the lore on something like the Tertium Gundam being based on the Mk-III right here, and then in reality, Bandai end up farting it out as a premium Bandai kit. Just like this right here. But it's a nice premium Bandai kit at that. So jumping right into the aesthetics now with that 360 spin, and there is the High Grade Mk-III, and I'll throw up the art on the right hand side. So first off, I will mention this doesn't have the absolutely awesome 80s vibe that on the right has. This is usual when it comes to high grades. We tend to get a more modernized, blockier, standard Gundam look to a lot of the 80s design. So this is more accurate to the line art of the updated line arts. Like this one right here of the Unit 8, which I expect to see coming out through P-Bandai sometime in the future as well. But when it comes to the model kit right here, this is very, very nice looking. The only little bit of a complaint I would have, of course, is the color separation could be a little bit better on the detailing. But these are tiny, tiny details. For the most part, this does look phenomenal. And if you zoom on into the head, this has some absolutely killer Zeta Gundam vibes going on here. This looks so cool. Of course, we do have a lot of repeated parts from the Tertium Gundam, mainly the arms, and some other parts here and there, but to me, this feels like a completely different build. Anyway, let's get in a little bit closer. So first off, I have to say that the High Grade Mk-III is a very nice looking kit. And just like I said before, it would have been nice to have seen a little bit more color separation in a lot of the parts that would have broken up that sea of blue. So on the sticker sheet, we do have a lot of orange, which would have been on some of the venting and detailing on here. I'm sure if you stick these on or paint those up, it will really take away from the fact that it's very, very, very blue, especially from the back. When it comes to the surface detailing, it is quite nice, but not overkill. We've got some interesting aspects to this, including the holes in the front skirting. That is nice. Some panel lining all over the place. You've got a little bit of an asymmetrical one there on the front. But for the most part, it is classy and minimal. I did already mention those stickers, but as for the ones that I did use, as usual, they're the shiny ones. So anything that is meant to be a kind of camera or sensor, like the ones on the chest, in the eyes, or on the head, those ones I did use. I will also mention to take care while cutting this out and cleaning it up, because the blue plastic on this is a little bit prone to marking, and Bandai didn't try anywhere to hide any of the nubs. So they're on surfaces all over the place, and we do have a couple of seams in the arms and the upper chest that you might need to fill in if you want to, but besides that, it does look glorious, and it has that awesome Zeta Gundam style glare that I absolutely adore. This thing has some nice angles, pointy bits, and a lot of cool stuff going on. Let's check out the accessories. But before we do that, it's time for some size comparisons. There it is side by side with the Granddaddy RX-78-2, aka the Gundam Mk-I, I guess. Next to the Gundam Mk-II, that is the real grade. Beside the Reborn 100 version of the Gundam Mk-III, and I have to say, just looking at them side by side here, the Reborn 100 is visually so much nicer. More angles, more surface detail, more of the kind of 80s vibe to some kind of degree, especially up at the head. And I don't know, to me it just makes a bigger oomph than the high grade right here does. And it's a full release. So now up on the shelf beside all of the RX-78-2s to get a good idea of its size and its shelf presence. And as you'd expect, it is a little bit bigger than your average high grade, but it's got nothing really crazy going on, so it doesn't stand out too much. Next up there it is beside some Build Divers and Build Divers Re-Rising kits, beside some main high-grade Gundams from other Mobile Suit Gundam series. There it is beside some high-grade Universal Century Gundams from big to small. Just to get an idea of its size, it's pretty sizable. And finally there it is on the deck of the Argama beside a couple of 1/44th scale Zeta Gundam model kits. So now jumping into the accessories, and once again here it is with absolutely everything that comes in the box, so let's check it all out one by one. So moving into the weapons first, and first off we have a pair of beam sabers. The beams on these are fairly standard, just your clear beam. The handles themselves do look quite nice. They are plain, yes, but they do look cool in grey. When these are not in use, you can just pop them off like so as usual, remove the beams, and these can be stored then on the front of the shield, just like so, which is pretty cool. We'll get back to that shield later. Next up, moving on to the long-range weapons, and this is the first of two beam rifles. We saw these before with the high-grade Tertium Gundam. The one shade of grey, we do have a removable E-cap down bottom. The E-caps can be stored on the rear of the shield. We've got two spare, one attached onto this rifle, one attached onto the other one. So there is an example of it attached, and this has a real 80s Zeta Gundam vibe through and through, looking pretty cool. When it is not in use, this does have a H-shaped adapter on the side, and this is for attaching it onto the butt flap like so for storage. Looks good and holds on well. Just like with the high-grade Tertium Gundam, we do have a second beam rifle in here. This one's really cool. It's a nice blocky design, but it is a little let down by the reliance on stickers, especially an awkward fitting one up front, and a real killer hollow part in the rear side of this sensor here. This stands out a lot and looks pretty gnarly. Everything about this rifle is exactly the same as the last one we saw, so it attaches into the hand in the same way, that sandwich style. The front of the hand and back of the hand are the bread, and the rifle itself is the ham. Simple. This is an incredibly cool looking beam rifle. Honestly, I love the blocky look with the E-cap magazine hidden away. It's such a cool, unique looking beam rifle. When it is not in use, once again pop it out of the hand, and it can attach round back on the hard point on the butt flap. That is what it looks like attached. Next up in here, we've got an absolutely huge pair of beam sabers. Now, these seem to be using master grade sized beams in them because this is the size of beam we had in the standard beam sabers so far. These are big. These use the alternate hands that are included in here, which are these holding hands with a peg in the palm. Attaching them is simply just pop the handle of the beam sabers into the hands like so, simple as. These look great attached because they are huge, and when they're not in use, just pop off that beam and you can attach them up onto the backpack like so as a pair of cannons. That is pretty cool. So next up in here, we've got the shield. We've seen this already because we've attached some E-caps and the beam sabers onto it. This is essentially just made up of three parts. That is the dark plastic, the light plastic, and around on the other side, we do have an attachment point for the arm. This is just a rotating peg, so this attachment point, it can only spin. Attaching this on is pretty simple. It just attaches on like so. And I will mention, because it just fell off, for some reason the hands for holding onto those huge beam sabers are more likely to fall out of the wrist than the standard holding hands in here, which is kind of strange. So yeah, the whole time I was wondering whether or not you could actually attach the beams into the beam saber handles while they're attached to the shield as a kind of arm-mounted offensive weapon, because I adore arm-mounted offensive weapons. And the answer is yes, you can. And the beams actually come together in a kind of point, which makes it look like, well, this is the point. And it probably is, honestly. This looks cool and thoroughly effective. Anyway, on to that articulation. So now moving on to the articulation, and first off I will mention about the build a little bit. So for the most part this is solid as a rock, besides a couple of issues it did inherit from the Tertium Gundam. The main issue that I find with this is sometimes when you're moving the arm around, it just pops out like this. It just makes its way out. That wrist as well on those flat open hands. It just, you know, you just do this a bit and then pop. Not much effort involved, just moving it around, they will work their way out, which is kind of, well, can be annoying at times. At the neck, we've got the standard double ball jointed giggity poly cap, but we don't really get much out of it. That is just down, next to no up whatsoever, and side to side, a little limited. The poly cap in the shoulder is aligned to move it forward like so. We've got the full roll because of the ball joint, the full 360 spin, and as for all the way up, that is about all we get before this will pop. And it will pop a lot. Bad design right here. We've got a full 360 spin at the upper elbow right here. The elbow bend is pretty bad. It's just a right angle. And we've got a bog standard ball joint at the wrist. We've got a very basic ab crunch here that is 2 polycap balls, nothing side to side, and the full 360 spin at the waist. Moving down to the skirting armor now, and the front skirting just moves up like so. The side skirting is just up and down as well, and when it comes to the butt flap, that is a basic paralyzed butt flap. The hip joint mechanism in here is a rocking side-to-side mechanism which lowers one leg while raising the other. As for the kicks, there it is all the way up to the front, about parallel to the ground. Out to the back, it is a bit blocked by that massive butt flap. And finally, as for the splits, the Mark III can pull off the full splits, no problem. Next up then is the knee, and that is a standard double jointed bend, and that's a nice dynamic knee bend right there. Getting that foot in the ground for the functional ankle test, there it is to the front and back, which isn't too bad, but the side to side pivot is incredibly limited. We do have some arm on the front and rear of the leg, which can move up and down, just like so. Around onto the backpack, and we've got a couple of things going on here. First off, we've got a peg which rotates this segment. When the beam cannons are attached, that can allow them to pivot over the shoulder just like this. And the outer joint we have is a ball joint, which does what a ball joint does do. Finally then, there are the wing binder sections all the way open, and there they are all the way closed. And the closed mode actually looks super speedy fast and awesome. So the articulation on the Gundam Mark III is, well, subpar I feel for 2021. It is okay, but there's a lot of limited areas. The janky shoulders always falling off as a bit of a pain in the butt, but on the whole it's, I guess, average, if not a little bit below that. So anyway, that right there is it for the review of the High Grade Gundam Mark III, and this gets a silver tier or pretty much bog standard when it comes to high grade. So this is a good kit in a lot of ways, and it does drop the ball in other ways, but on the whole, it's still a good all-round high grade. Color-wise, we've got the majority of what we need. You will need to color in some parts or use some stickers to get it fully color accurate, but the overall design, the mold, the sculpt, and the overall proportions are all perfect and look phenomenal. Not quite as nice as the Reborn 100, but still look quite good. The accessories we get in here are quite nice. The hands can be a little bit awkward, the ones that hold the bigger beam sabers, but on the whole, quite good. And when it comes to the articulation, it is a little bit on the disappointing side, but it could be a whole lot worse. This is about average for an old school high grade, not really up to spec for this year I don't feel, but it is okay. The shoulder is constantly falling off is a bit of a pain in the butt. We had that with the high grade tertium, and is this worth running out to get at P-Bandai prices at this point? Do you really need a 1/44th scale Gundam Mark III in your life? Then I say still go for it. It is a good high grade. Just not a great one. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching. If you want one of your own, I'll throw a link to buy down there in the description. And as always, I will see you next time. As always, this video right here would not have been possible without each and every one of you guys who watches my videos, including those of you who help out on the channel memberships and over on Patreon, including Craig Jerry, Van Fawn, Sean T, Mr. Winter, Lauren C. Hack, Joseph Kuklock, Global Frequency Studios, Forsetti, Caleb Engelhart, and Bakuto Official.